to me again. Wonderful story of love, with the immortal strain. Angels with rapture announce it, shepherds with wonder receive it. Sinner, oh, won't you believe it? Wonderful story of love. 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 Though you are far away, wonderful story of love. Still he doth call today, calling from Calvary's mountain, down from the crystal bright fountain, e'en from the dawn of creation. Wonderful story of love. 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 Jesus provides a rest. Wonderful story of love. For all the pure and blessed, rest in those mansions above us, with those who've gone on before us, singing the rapturous chorus. Wonderful story of love. 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 I am weak, but thou art strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea.
All right. Hopefully the stream is started. And we are looking at Leviticus 17 this evening. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, again, this chapter begins the way so many of these chapters in this book have begun, with telling us that what follows is from God. The Lord spoke to Moses. This wasn't Moses' idea. This wasn't something that began in his mind or in his thoughts. These weren't commandments or rules that he was putting into place. These were coming from what God said to him. He said, speak to Aaron and to his sons and to all the sons of Israel, and say to them, this is what the Lord has commanded, saying, any man from the house of Israel who slaughters an ox or a lamb or a goat in the camp, or who slaughters it outside the camp, and has not brought it up to the doorway of the tent of meeting to present it as an offering to the Lord before the tabernacle of the Lord, blood guiltiness is to be reckoned to that man. He has shed blood, and that man shall be cut off from among his people. All sacrifice, God says, is to be brought to the tent of meeting. That's what this is about. This is a command of God. You do not offer an ox or a lamb or a goat somewhere other than God's tent of meeting. Any man who does that, he says, shall be guilty. Guilt is imputed to that man, for he has shed blood, is how it's put in verse 4. That man shall be cut off from among the people. What does that mean, that he's cut off from among the people? Okay. Any other ideas? besides shunned? Anyone? Anyone? I feel like I need to say Bueller now. The people that have seen that movie are giggling and nobody else is. Uh, cut off, separated from, disconnected to, no longer part of, no longer incorporated into the blessings of the association. Is this a serious matter? Absolutely, it's a serious matter. Sacrifice isn't left up to personal choice, is what we're learning here. They didn't get to just do what they wanted to do, how they wanted to do it, where they wanted to do it. They did what God instructed them to do. They did it how God instructed them to do it, and they did it where God instructed them to do it. Did the tent of assembly matter in Israel? How many people do we have running around today suggesting things like, well, as long as you have a relationship with Christ, church doesn't matter. Organized religion doesn't matter. There's a lot of people that are saying things like that. And it is being promulgated more and more through the social avenues of communication that we have on the internet. And more people every day begin to believe that it doesn't matter how, when, or where you do things. But that is not the picture that the Bible gives. Now, are we locked into a particular location the way that they were? There's some quiet, small movements. Are we locked into a particular location the way that they were? No. But that doesn't mean that we're at liberty to do anything we want to, anytime we want to do it, however we want to do it, without consideration of what God says. Yes, ma'am. Well, that deals with all those chapters that we read about earlier. Some of those sacrifices were completely burnt on the altar. Some of the meat from that sacrifice, from certain of those sacrifices, went to the priests. Some of that meat, the offerer was obligated to eat. But don't misread verses 1 through 4 here. I don't think it's talking about what they slaughter for food. I think this is talking about what they slaughter for sacrifice. And they can't just say, it's a long way into the temple. I'm way out here on the outside edge of the camp, and so I'm just going to slaughter my animal and offer my sacrifice here. God said, no. You bring it to the altar. You bring it to the priests at the tent of meeting, and it's going to be offered on the altar. And if you kill it somewhere else, and you don't bring it to me to be offered, then you are guilty. So it's very important to understand he is commanding them that all sacrifice is to be brought to the Lord in the specific way and place that the Lord had commanded to be done. Now look at verses 5 through 7, which builds on this idea. The reason is so that the sons of Israel may bring their sacrifices, which they were sacrificing in the open field, that they may bring them into the Lord at the doorway of the tent of meeting to the priest and sacrifice them as sacrifices of peace offerings to the Lord. And the priest shall sprinkle the blood on the altar of the Lord at the doorway of the tent of the meeting, and offer up the fat in the smoke as a soothing aroma to the Lord. And they shall no longer sacrifice their sacrifices to the goat demons, which they play the harlot. This shall be a permanent statute to them throughout their generations. And so we're building on this a little bit more information going on. These sacrifices that they're offering in other places, it turns out, are being offered to what? To idols. And he says, you're not to do that. You're to bring all of your sacrifices to me. You don't just bring me some sacrifices and then offer other sacrifices to these false gods, these goat demons. And apparently, based upon the little bit of research that I did, there are a lot of pagan deities that took the form of a goat. And it doesn't specify which one they were engaged with. I think that's probably by intent that it doesn't specify which one, because it doesn't matter which one, and it would include anyone. And he says, don't do that. You bring them and you offer them to me. The blood is to be offered at my altar. And it's a statute forever. So it centralizes worship. It removes idolatrous practices. And it says that sacrifice belongs to the Lord and the Lord alone. Now, again, this isn't the end of the story about this. There's something much more important that he's building toward. He's building his case from the outside in. We're working toward the primary situation. And so look at verses 8 and 9. Then you shall say to them, any man from the house of Israel, or from the aliens who sojourn among them, who offers a burnt offering or sacrifice and does not bring it to the doorway of the tent of meeting to offer it to the Lord, that man also shall be cut off from his people. So he said, it doesn't matter who you are, anybody. Doesn't matter if you are one of Israel or if you're even somebody who is sojourning with the people of Israel. People that we would later classify as proselytes, people that chose to live among the Jews and worship with the Jews, and doesn't matter. You bring it to me and offer it, or you will be cut off. If you're worshiping other gods, you'll be cut off from the people. It's regulated by God. There is no acceptable approach to God apart from the way that he has given. And we start seeing this more and more clearly. This is the only way that you can offer me sacrifice. And any other person, in any other, no matter who you are, any other way in which you offer sacrifice, any other deity to which you offer sacrifice to, in any departure, I am the Lord. All sacrifice is offered to me. It's offered in exactly the way that I say it's to be offered. It's offered in exactly the place in which I say it's to be offered, or it is not acceptable. This is very much akin to Jesus saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. There is only one avenue. Now, keep in mind, what was chapter 16 about? Atonement. What was atonement? Okay. The word atonement itself basically means to be one with, to be united to, or it means to cover. And the idea of atonement is that there is a covering of the debt and a unification between the debtor and God. So atonement is all about the debt of sin being removed. Remember the sacrificial scapegoat? that carried the sins away, the debt being removed, and the fellowship with God being established. And he moves from that discussion directly into this discussion, saying, listen, there is only one avenue for your sacrifices. There is only one way in which you can maintain your atonement. The atonement was made for the people. Now the people have to follow in their peace offerings and sin sacrifices to maintain their atonement. And if they don't do it exactly through the channel that God has given them, then they are forfeiting that unification with God. They are no longer in fellowship with God. Now look at verses 10, 11, and 12 as he continues to talk about this and why this is so important. Why does he regulate these things so much? Why does it matter how the things are handled? Why does it matter who does it? Why does it matter where it's being done? Why does it matter that you have to collect the blood and you have to do the various things? We're going to get into a little bit more detail about some of that in just a minute. Why does all of this stuff matter? He's answering the question. He's answering the question that many people still have today, which is, why did Jesus have to die? I've actually heard believers say things like, well, Jesus didn't have to die. Yes, he did. God could have done it some other way. No, he couldn't. I think it's more accurately said to be in the realm of ignorance in which they say that. There is no other way, and we're going to find out why that is. We're going to answer that question in this chapter. Why it has to be blood. Verse 10, any man from the house of Israel or from the aliens who sojourn among them who eats any blood, I will set my face against that person who eats blood and will cut him off from among his people. Now, I'm not going to stop here necessarily and completely open up the discussion. I'm just going to say, why? That's the question you ought to be asking yourself. Why? Why is it such a bad thing? For the life of the flesh is in the blood. And I have given it to you on the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood by reason of the life that makes atonement. Therefore I said to the sons of Israel, no person among you may eat blood, nor may any alien who sojourns among you eat blood. We're getting to the core of the matter. What is the blood? It's life. That's why it matters so much. That's why it matters how you handle it and what you do with it and how you treat it. And the only way for atonement to be possible was for life to be offered. This kind of goes back to some of our study back in Exodus. You'll remember a great part of the law that was given through Moses was eye for eye justice. You shall give eye for eye, hand for hand, foot for foot, and life for life. He was teaching in those laws. What does it take to atone for my soul? Well, it took life. to atone for my soul. Blood had to be poured out to atone for my soul. To be able to bring my soul back into fellowship with God, to be able to carry away the sins that have stained my soul. Life has to be offered. Serious stuff, not to be taken lightly at all. And the blood is the life. When they took that animal and they bled that animal, you remember when we studied these sacrifices? Part of the process was actually bleeding out the animal and collecting the blood. They collected that blood because it was the life. Of that animal. And you need to show respect for life. And that's why to kill an animal and to offer it as sacrifice to a God that's not even really a God, an idol, a goat demon, that's just wasteful of life. Who owns life? Who does life belong to? God. God breathed into man life. God made all of the creatures living beings. God imparted life. Life belongs to him, not to us. And for us to act as though we have authority and control over life. God is saying to us, look, you take life when I say you can take life. When did he tell us we could take life? There are some circumstances that he has said when we can take life. One he commanded. He just flat out commanded it. By the way, all of this brings into clarity the point of that command. What did he say after the flood? So the flood has receded. The time passes. Noah and his family finally get off the ark. Noah offers a sacrifice to God, and there is that covenant that God makes. The covenant that is still enforced to this day, the sign of which is what? The rainbow. This is a sign of my covenant. I'm going to put my bow in the sky. This is the sign of the covenant that I'm making with you this day. For the first time, man was told that he could do what? That he could kill animals for food. Permission given by God for the first time that I can kill an animal so that I can eat. Until that day, how had man gotten his food? The plants of the ground. And then he said something else. He said, you do not kill man. And then he said, if someone does kill man, I require your life, life for life, at the hands of men. And so this idea of murder being morally wrong and the proper punishment for murder being the forfeit of the life of the one who wantonly takes another human life. And then he gives the reason for that, which was what? That he made man in his image. That there's something inherently valuable about human life, that if it's taken with no good cause, the only legitimate response is for the one who did such thing to forfeit their life. And by man, his life should be taken. So God institutes capital punishment for the crime of murder. And he does it because life is so precious. He is underscoring that here. He is saying, look, the only way that your soul can be atoned for and you can have your life back is for blood, which is life, to be offered to atone for it. Other life is required. Now, as we talked about at the very end of class last time, the blood of bulls and goats that he is regulating so tightly here because of its value and saying, look, you don't just waste the life of these animals that I've made offering sacrifices to these false gods. He's regulating this very tight. He's telling them how, when, and where this life is to be offered. We later find out in the book of Hebrews was never even sufficient to take away our sins because the life of a goat isn't great enough or comparable to the life of a person. My soul can't be atoned for. So what did it take in order for my soul to be atoned? It took the life of man. And not just any man, but a perfect, sinless, without blemish sacrifice to be offered. His blood offered to atone for my soul. He's explaining that and reminding us of what it costs, what it really costs for our atonement. The life of the flesh is in the blood. I have given it to you on the altar to make atonement for your souls. I think that is a messianic statement pointing forward to Christ. I have given it on the altar. That's God talking. He's not talking about the bull that Aaron poured out on the altar, the bull's blood. He's talking about Christ going into heaven and offering his own blood, looking forward to that. It is the blood by reason of the life that makes atonement. By reason of the life. Very serious stuff. Shouldn't be ignored or taken for granted. So listen to what he goes on to say, verses 13 and 14. So when any man from the sons of Israel or from the aliens who sojourn among them, and the importance of all this is, listen, this law doesn't just control my people, it controls the aliens among my people. In hunting. Now this gets to what? What's hunting? We don't do a whole lot of that here in Lafayette. In fact, they get mad at us when we discharge our firearms in town. What is hunting? Killing for food, which is a legitimate thing. We just talked about that, right? That's been a legitimate thing since after the flood. But listen to what he says. In hunting, he catches a beast or a bird which may be eaten. He shall pour out its blood and cover it with earth. For as for the life of all flesh, its blood is identified with its life. Therefore I said to the sons of Israel, you are not to eat the blood of any flesh, for the life of all flesh is its blood. Whoever eats it shall be cut off. What is he saying here? Listen, there's a way to handle life. And so even when you're out hunting and you kill an animal that you are permitted to eat, you get the blood and essentially bury it. Pour it out and cover it with the earth. You don't eat the blood. You eat the flesh, but the blood, which is the life, you show respect for. when any person eats an animal which dies or is torn by beast, whether he is a native or an alien, he shall wash his clothes and bathe in water and remain unclean until evening. Then he will become clean. I want to stop there for a moment. Just say this. A lot of people seem to think that it was unlawful for them to eat animals that just died, that they didn't hunt and kill. It wasn't unlawful. They think it was unlawful for them to eat an animal that has been killed by an animal. Wasn't unlawful. You know what it was, though? It was unclean. So if you did it, then you had to go through the ritual cleansing bathing process and wait the day, and you were unclean until the end of the day. They could eat it, but it made you unclean. If he does not wash them or bathe his body, then he shall bear his guilt. If you don't go through the cleansing, then you're guilty. That becomes wrong. So even in hunting, you have to properly handle things. And if you're dealing with life of that which dies naturally, or that which is attacked by a beast, you become unclean. Why? Because you can't handle the blood properly in that situation. You can't show respect for the life in that situation. And so it was not preferable to do it that way. And it made you unclean, and you had to be cleansed. There's a theological movement in this chapter. The shedding of blood is restricted, it's regulated. Sacrifice has to be centralized and directed to God alone. Blood is set apart because it represents life. Blood is given to God for atonement because life belongs to God and must be treated respectfully accordingly. And the key thing behind all of it is actually it's stated twice. You can choose verse 11 or verse 17. I think verse 11 sits as the linchpin verse. For the life of the flesh is in the blood. I have given it for you on the altar to make atonement for your souls. Life is what was offered. And Leviticus 17 serves as a transition into all of the laws that follow from this are all about holiness. You remember what was before chapter 16? You had the sacrifice chapters that were like chapters 1 through 7. Chapter 8 through 16 are all chapters about what? Cleanness and uncleanness. Then you have atonement. Then you have this chapter that explains the vital and key role that blood plays in atonement. And everything that comes after this is going to be about holiness, about how you should live because you've been atoned for, because your sins have been covered, because you are in fellowship with God. You are now to live holy. Be holy as I am holy. And so the rest of this book is going to deal with these holiness laws that instruct us in how to be righteous. And those are very important to us, or at least they ought to be. And these are not laws that you have to sit around and go, well, why do I have to do that? Because if your desire is to be holy, and you're being told this is how you are holy, then what do you do? If that's what you want to accomplish, well, you do it. Kind of like I'm not intended to pick on anybody in particular, but there's a plethora of people out there who will say, I've always wanted to play an instrument. And they even sometimes go so far as to buy one. And they never learn how to play an instrument. And you know why it is? It's real simple. They don't practice. If you really want to learn how to play an instrument, you put the time in. Now, you may not ever be great on it. That's another thing. That's a whole different issue. But if you never learn how to do anything, it's because you weren't willing to practice. If you're not willing to practice, you don't really want to know how to play an instrument. You like the idea of being able to play an instrument. You don't really want to do it because part of doing it is the practice. Same thing with holiness. You like the idea of being holy, but part of holiness is the practice of holiness, the learning how to discern good from evil, the study of the Word of God so that I can rightfully decide what is righteous and what is not righteous, and the discipline in which to carry out those things. And it takes time and it takes a lot of work. But if we desire to be holy, because we desire to be one with God, then that is something that we are pleased to do and grateful that God has informed us. Hey, this is holy and this is not holy. Okay, I want to be holy. Now that I know what holy is and what holy is not, then I choose what is holy. No one has to make me do it. People don't have to stand behind me with a cattle prod poking me saying, no, go this way. No, don't do that. I want to be holy. And so I'm grateful that God has told me what it is I should do to be holy. So we got these messianic teachings throughout this particular chapter. Blood is given for atonement. Life is in the blood. These things are connected to Jesus and the sacrifice of Christ. Atonement requires the shedding of blood, directly connected to Jesus on the cross. And all of these things lie at the core of what it means to be a follower of God, what it means to be a child of God. If we're not doing these things, if we're not willing to do these things, he tells us several times in this chapter what the result is. If we don't handle these things and treat them as holy and approach him exactly the way and in the place that he has commanded, then we are cut off. We don't retain our oneness with God just because we were atoned for. We can be cut off and discarded if we do not walk in holiness. All right,